Hello guys, this is Justin from ModoCookie.com, and in today's tutorial we're going to be covering the creation of a matchbox. Now you're probably thinking, what's so complicated about a matchbox? Well, it's not that complicated, but since this is not a regular matchbox, we're going to learn how to model it, and then texture it, and then render it. And I want to say that for the texturing, we're not going to be using any outside images. Excuse me. We're only going to be using Modo's built-in textures. So let's get started. We're going to use a cube, actually a plane, and we're going to center it. And now I know that my matchbox is gonna be it's not gonna be square, it's gonna be rather rectangular, and this is about right, maybe a bit smaller like that. Okay, and we can start by going into the front view and switch over to wireframe. And we're going to use the Edge Extend tool to just make the outline of this matchbox. Okay, kind of like that. And now, before we start adding more details, in this state the matchbox is quite simple. So I'm gonna unfold it just so we can see it better. And we can work even better. Okay, and now this is our matchbox. And before we do anything, we need to add the last piece of detail. That's gonna be carved right in here. So we're gonna start with a cube. I'm gonna make it the right size, kind of like that. And now I'm making sure that it passes right through the matchbox. I'm gonna add a loop cut right in the middle. And now remember, this is upside down, so when we're gonna fold it back, it needs to look good. So this is actually this is supposed to be like this, like this. So it's supposed to be rotated, but once I fold this, it's gonna look correct. So let me delete the extra mesh there, and now we can just use geometry, and I'm gonna use solid drill with the mode to stencil. Okay, and I'm gonna start to connect this up, but I want to say that while I'm connecting it up, I'm also taking into account how I'm gonna use my how I'm gonna smooth my mesh later. So you can delete oops, can't actually delete that. So I'm gonna add a few edges now. And I'm gonna make sure, oh, it actually doesn't need to be slice selected, ticked. So I'm gonna add two edges. I'm gonna change the mode of symmetry, and I'm gonna move them till they match up roughly with my shape. And you see we have one more point there, but we don't need to add a third edge because that point is gonna end right there. So this is gonna be okay. So I'm gonna cut it like that. I'm gonna connect it up. And now I'm gonna move this from this point to this point. Okay, and this one goes here, and this one goes here. It doesn't really matter if they're not straight. Okay, and now we can remove this one. But first we need to make sure we have a quad here. It's gonna be like that. Now this won't be a something's wrong here. It's removing my vertex and I don't really want it to. Modo's been acting really strange recently. Maybe if we delete this, or actually not delete it and maybe bevel it like that and then delete it. Yeah, Modo doesn't want to work with me on this one. Let's move on. We'll deal with it later. We're finished connecting this up. And on the other hand, you can try polygon merge and it will fix. Yeah, okay. And now this still has 0 thickness, but before we add thickness, since we're gonna use the easiest way, just the thicken tool, we need to add some support edges to make sure some of our corners are still sharp, even if this is supposed to be paper. So along with Modo 501, there was a new tool, actually a couple new tools introduced, but the one that we're interested in is add loop. So it basically does the same thing as the loop slice, just that you don't need to select the polygons. It's similar to Maya's edge split. Okay, and looks like we have an extra thing here. We can remove it. Okay, so with add loop, we're gonna add a loop right there. Holding down the shift key reactivates it, and one there, and one there, and one there. Okay, and there, and there, and there. It's pretty boring doing this, but someone has to do it. Okay, and now the bottom. And one here. We'll probably have to add one or two more after we thicken the object, but this will ease the process. And one more here. Okay, and we actually need this one to be straight. So I'm just gonna use the local action center to be able to straighten it out, and then I'm gonna use edge slide. Okay, I'm gonna move it closer, and now this is all neat and sharp, so we can go ahead and thicken it. But before that, we're gonna save our scene and use the thicken tool. And now we don't want this to be really thick because it's paper or something thicker, a bit thicker. Make sure you tick sharp. And that should be okay. And now we can add some loops in here using the loop slice, but apparently we have a problem in here. Okay, so this edge is supposed to be like that. Okay, let's just check for similar problems. And it looks like we're good. Okay, so we can go ahead and add those loops. Okay, and this corner is a bit soft, but I think it will work. Okay. Okay, this is better. I wasn't liking the way it was smoothing out. And I would also like this to be a bit sharper, but apparently Modo doesn't agree. But I think this would work. This will work. Okay, so now that we have our match case, we need to make the actual matches. Oh, one more thing, I almost forgot. We need to make the scratching surface. So I'm just gonna copy those polygons. I'm gonna hide everything. I'm gonna delete the extra edges. Make sure I don't have any more any extra vertices. Okay, and this one I'm just gonna extrude just like that, just so it's above our match case here. You can even delete the back polygon. Okay, and now we need to create the actual matches. So let's rename this to Matchbox, and we're gonna use this cube to create the matches. Now the matches are pretty simple, so we're gonna first of all we're gonna make sure that they need to fit 2 rows of matches in here. So this would be 1, yeah, they can fit. Make this thicker, move it okay, perfect. So let's create this match real fast, and then we're gonna clone it. And I know from what I've seen is that usually there are no more than 7 matches in here, so I'm just gonna quickly instance clone this one to 7 clones. Okay, I actually need to see it. Okay. So instance clone, so 6. Okay, so it needs that this one needs to be thicker. So in order to make it thicker, we're just gonna scale it on the z-axis. But as you can see, it doesn't look all natural. So we're gonna make it so it fits around 8 or so. I'm gonna make this a tiny bit thinner. Okay, I'm gonna rename this to match, and I'm gonna instance clone it again. This time I'm gonna leave a small gap. So 9 is gonna be okay. Okay, and now we can just modify this one, and the others will update. So we're gonna bring it up to right about here, and we're gonna add a loop because we're gonna taper the head here a bit, like that. And let me just get in here and show you a nicer way to do this. And we're gonna go over to the left. We're gonna add something like 4. Oops. Need to make sure that they are uniform. Okay. And I'm gonna use a fall off. I'm gonna use a linear fall off. And in the shape preset, I'm gonna choose ease out. Oops. Okay. And it's actually ease in. And we don't need this polygon. Oh, it's actually the other way around, so we need to reverse the fall off. Okay, like that, and now we can use no fall off. And we can start adding those support edges on the matches. But first we can try to copy this one and see if the clones follow. So let's add those support edges. Just need 2 this time. Right there, and now we're gonna use add loop, and maybe 1 in here to make sure it doesn't smooth off, and 1 in there, and 1 like that. And we need to add a few extra segments in here just to make sure it doesn't smooth too much. Okay, and now we just need to add a head, and the head, we're just gonna add a sphere. Okay. Try not to let it go through, but it appears I don't have a choice unless we can shrink this like that, and then shrink the sphere too. And I guess that's okay. It's not going through on the other side. Maybe make it a bit thicker. And that's the match. Now we can go ahead and copy it. Control C, Control V. Okay. And the trick with this other match is that they are sticking together at the bottom here, but on the top they're actually one above the other, kind of like that. Okay, and now we can modify this matchbox. So it's a bit like that. Okay. And save the scene. And now we're pretty much done with the modeling phase. Now we're gonna group. Actually, let's make these children of the match. And we're gonna group this, call it Matchbox. Actually need to rename this to paper something. And this is Matchbox. And now we can go ahead and duplicate, actually use duplicate hierarchy to get the children. And on the second matchbox, we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna fold it back. So the way we're gonna do that, we're gonna actually select all of those. Oops, forgot to select everything. Okay, and we can rotate it. Or actually, we can deselect those. And rotate it, and then move it back in place. And we're gonna rotate that back in a second. Okay. It could go a bit closer, but it's gonna be okay for now. Now I'm noticing an error here. This hole is supposed to be closer to the top. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna disable our smoothing. I'm gonna go back to the front, okay, and I'm gonna select the whole. Okay, and I'm gonna use the local action center, and I'm just gonna move it back. I'm sorry, up a bit. And you can do the same for the other Matchbox, but I'm not gonna bother right now. Okay, it's quite easier to do it for this one. There we go. Okay, so now let's pose our objects for rendering. So we're gonna rotate. Oops, I need to select automatic. Okay, I'm not gonna bother putting it on the floor. It's easier to bring the floor to it. Okay, I'm gonna rotate this one like that. I think it's rotated the wrong side, yeah. Like that. Now we're going to bring the camera into place. We're going to set the dimension of the render to be 960 by 540. Okay, and we're going to add a quick floor. I'm gonna save. I'm gonna go to the top and add a quick floor right here. And looks like this one could be a bit closer. And we're gonna switch over to the render tab. And on the render tab, we need to switch over to final color. And the render scheme here is not going to be very complicated. We're going to add just an area light to render our scene. So we're going to go over here to Item, Create Light, Area Light. And it's gonna come from behind the Matchbox is. Okay, I'm just gonna switch over to local. I'm gonna move it closer and make it bigger. Okay, I'm going to turn off simple shading. I'm going to change the samples to 128. And I lied. We're going to use one more light. This one is a dome light, just so we can get some even lighting. I'm going to turn off simple shading too. I'm going to use 256 samples on this one. And the radiance is going to be something like 1.5 maybe. Yeah, 1.5 is gonna work. I'm gonna turn on global illumination with ambient intensity of 0. The environment, we're gonna we're gonna leave it like this, but we're gonna change visible to indirect rays because we don't want it affecting our indirect rays. And now let's rename this to floor. Now we're gonna call this, assign a material, call it floor, and we're gonna make it a shadow catcher. Okay, 0 diffuse, 0 specular. We're gonna add a shader with the alpha type set to shadow catcher. Okay, and we're gonna change the background a little, just so we're, oops, something's happening here. Okay, just so we're in tone with the textures that we're gonna add on the Matchbox. Okay, so we're going to add a bit of a red. Actually, let's just leave this to black, like that. And we're going to change the ground color to have a hint of red. Okay, and for some reason we're not getting our shadows. Oh, we are. Okay, it's just a bug in the viewport here. And now let's add the other materials. So we're gonna start with the match case. Let me just get the paper, and we're gonna call this just like that. Whoops. Looks like I misspelled it. Paper. Yes. And this one's gonna be black. So we're gonna change it to maybe 30 diffuse. It's gonna be close to black. We still want some color information in there. Okay. Specular amount is 0. Reflection amount, maybe just a hint, 0.2. And we want 20% for now. And we're going to add blurry reflections, 128 reflection rays. And the roughness, we want it to be quite blurry, so we're going to leave it at, maybe go with 50. And the Fresnel is a bit too much, as you can see there. Maybe 10, maybe even 5. So even though paper is not very reflective, we are going to add some reflection because it makes it look good. So now that we're done with that, what we're going to add is this scratch paper. So we're just going to name it Scratch. And this one is a bit trickier. We're going to duplicate the camera here. We're going to rename this Shot Cam, and we're going to lock it just to make sure we don't move it. And we're going to change here to our camera, our second cam, so we can just move it and zoom in close on this scratch thing. So the scratch paper. The scratch paper, we're gonna add a noise, textures noise, and the difference here is gonna be that the size on the Z, I think it is, it's gonna be bigger, like 200 millimeters. Yeah. And this one smaller, So we get a texture kind of like that. Maybe 250 is a bit too much, so let's try 180. Okay. And we're going to use this multiplied. So we're going to multiply it right now. And you're not going to see a bigger difference. That's because our material, well, you are going to see a difference. But we're going to change this to 50% diffuse. And we're going to look for a brownish color. Kind of like that. And make sure conserve energy is on. Make sure conserve energy is on for the case. And on this one, we want to have just a bit specular, like 1. And we need to duplicate the noise and change it to specular amount. Okay, so we don't have and make sure it's set to normal. Okay, so we don't have specular, so we don't have such a uniform specular, and we can change the opacity to 25. Okay, I'm not really sure if there's something wrong with the render or with the texture here. So okay, specular amount. So we need to maybe lower the opacity even more. Put it to 0 here. 2. Yeah, 2 is gonna work. And now we're gonna duplicate this noise. And we're gonna change it to normal. We're gonna change it to bump. Okay. And the bump amplitude needs to be small, like 1 millimeter. And let's give it a test render. And you can see from the start that the specular is not doing a great job as I wanted it to do. So we're gonna disable the specular, okay, and just add maybe 1% or 2 Fresnel with blurry reflection. Let me open that render again and take a look. Okay, and we need to make sure that the shadows and the samples are okay. Okie dokie. Let's move on with the matches. So the match is gonna have 3 materials on it. So we're gonna have the first material is gonna be called match, and it's gonna have a red color. And so with that one, let me change this to gouache tone shading. And then the inner part of the match is going to have a white color, so call it match white. Okay. And then we're going to have the match head, which is going to be the same brownish color, brown red, like that. And we can zoom in right there. That looks okay, and let's edit these materials. So we have the match. Let me see if something is turned on here. Okay. And the match is going to have 80% diffuse. Okay, it's going to have 1% reflection, 20% Fresnel with blurry reflection, and we want it to be blurred, so 55%. Okay, and we're going to use the same technique with the noise. So noise, and it looks like we need to rotate it on the Y 25, I think. Oops, sorry, phone. Or actually, no, we don't need to rotate this because we're gonna scale it to something small, like 10. Okay, and we're gonna change it to bump. And the bump needs to be 0.5 millimeters. And let's just give this a test render. And it's looking okay, just that we need a bit more diffuse here, and the reflection, we're going to set it to 0, and we're just going to leave the Fresnel on with 15% strength. And let's just render again. Yeah, that's looking much better. And now the match white is gonna stay white because we're not seeing too much of it. Just make sure conserve energy is on for both. And the match head, well, this one can be have the same Fresnel amount with blurry reflections, and we're gonna add the noise with maybe 1 millimeter. That seems about okay. Set it to bump. Bump amplitude to 0.3 millimeters. And it's looking okay. Not really sure until I do a test render, but let's just leave it at that. Let's go ahead and assign the materials to the other Matchbox. So we're gonna call this paper. Gonna call this match head, match white, match white. Okay, and we can set it to shot cam. and we can give it a test render. Okay, it's looking good, and I have just a few more changes that I want to do. Okay, this scratch paper needs to have these numbers need to be a bit smaller, like 8 millimeters. Okay, and the opacity of this needs to be maybe 50%. Let's try with that. Okay, and the color a bit darker. Okay, and now we're gonna go over back to modeling, because we're gonna be adding the final touch, and that touch is gonna be a little magnet. I'm just gonna add a cube. Right there. Let me just toggle the inactive meshes, same as active. Okay, so we can see. Okay, make it a bit bigger. And we can chamfer the edges a bit so it doesn't look that sharp. Okay, and we're gonna call this Chrome. Switch over to the render tab, and we're just gonna put the reflection amount to 80%. And the Fresnel amount to 50, blurry reflection, and the roughness to 5. Conserve energy, and maybe 5% diffuse, and the color is going to be black. Okay, and let's give this a render. And I think it's looking okay. I'm gonna call it done. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.